Hi, you're listening to Childless and Moving Onward. This is the place where we talk about thriving in life when you're a woman who is childless, not by choice, regardless of the road that brought you to childlessness. Hi, and thanks for joining me for episode 74 of Childless and Moving Onward. I'm Gail Miller, your host, speaker, life coach, and doctor, and I also happen to be childless not by choice. I leave that for last because it's not how I define myself. While this is a significant part of my life, it's not the whole of who I am. That doesn't mean I don't have days when I feel sad, go through hard times, triggers, or have old wounds reopen or open more. I do. But this podcast is about recognizing those experiences and navigating living well with them. My hope is that though the pain of childlessness may always be with you, this podcast will show you that the pain no longer has to dictate how you live your life. So I'm going to start this out by saying, as a non-mom, okay, some of you may get this right away, but I'm going to explain it. What that's about is in response to the very common situation or occurrence of women starting their sentences with, as a mom. Okay. It happens a lot. But recently, in response to a lot of horrific things going on in this world, a lot of awful things happening to people, including kids, all over, I've seen so many posts and comments and articles that describe the pain people are feeling as we all witness these events. But it all starts with, as a mom, and then goes on to describe the heartbreak that this woman, whoever's writing whatever it is or speaking, it just to describe the heartbreak she's feeling as a result of hearing about someone losing their child or having a difficult time with their child in whatever fashion these horrifying outcomes have happened. Now, this is a pain that's unfathomable and it's unmatchable. But can the heartache really only be felt by women who are moms? Because I will tell you that each of the events that these posts and comments and articles and interviews, each of these are about the situations that led to this, what's being written and talked about. These events have left me in tears, completely broken. Now, I realize that many of the women who write or say these things are doing so from a place of deep empathy and personal identification. And they're using language that expresses their own vulnerability and the profound fear or sorrow that tragedies evoke for them as moms. I believe for most their intent is good, though I do happen to know that for many who do this, it's coming along from their own negative attitude about women who don't have children. But even when it's well-intentioned, it feels as if when pain or compassion is framed exclusively as a mom, it excludes others, intentionally or unintentionally, especially those of us who are not moms, not by choice. The grief, outrage, and heartache these events trigger do not belong solely to parents. They are fundamentally human emotions, rooted in our capacity to love, to empathize, and to imagine others suffering, even if we don't have children of our own. But so many people do think that those of us without children are unfeeling. It goes along with the stereotype and assumptions of women who do not have kids. This stereotype that women who aren't mothers lack empathy, lack warmth or understanding can be deeply painful and unfair. In reality, compassion and the ability to grieve for loss, for harm, or for injustice aren't emotional responses that only parents are capable of. In fact, the experiences we've had, the profound longing, the heartache, and the lack of understanding that we face often lead to an immense heightened tenderness and sensitivity. The idea that we are less capable of deep feeling disregards our humanity. It adds another layer of isolation on top of the pain we carry. It adds to the stereotype about women without children and the selfishness or the lack of humanity. The negative assumptions about women without children ignore the unique ways that we show care for others. We can be friends, mentors, aunts, uncles, godparents, caregivers for older relatives, neighbors, and sources of support in our neighborhoods and communities. What we've been through can make us more empathetic. It takes a lot of strength and emotion to grieve a future that will never be and still be there for others. I mean, it really truly gets exhausting at times having to constantly push back against these stereotypes and negative views of women without children. And in these times of collective tragedy or collective celebration, it can be especially discouraging. When we feel sorrow or we offer comfort in these moments, our emotions are often questioned or dismissed. I was in an in-person group for a course I was taking. It wasn't a huge class. We all fit around a large single table, round table. And the first day we introduced each other. We introduced ourselves and talked about what we each did. I explained my roles and spoke about my life coaching and the women I work with. And during one of the classes, the instructor was illustrating a point and spoke about her own child as a part of this. Her child had died, a story we all knew. When she spoke about her child in this particular context, it was very emotional. We all felt it. I wasn't alone as I felt tears welling up in my eyes and then streaming down my face. Along with the other class members, my heart broke for her. And then the woman next to me turned and said quietly, it wasn't a whisper, but it wasn't, it was just to me, but you could tell from the way she said it, because it was just to me, but without a whisper. She knew it was wrong. Or, I mean, that's my take. Because what she said to me, she also said it in a very rude, accusatory way. You're not a mom. Why are you crying? I was stunned. I was speechless. I truly never expected someone to be so blatantly nasty, quite frankly, so horrible, and so blatant in showing her view of me because I wasn't a mom. One more of the many who have assumed awful things just because I'm not a mom. And I know that I am not alone because I've heard stories like this from so many other women. The thing is, it's important to challenge this narrative, to make it clear that empathy doesn't come from giving birth. Though I admittedly, in that moment, I didn't challenge her narrative because I couldn't think clearly enough to respond in any coherent way other than blurting out to her a series of nasty names that just flashed through my head. But I didn't do that, and I never approached her about it. But when we're able to have a clear mind, and especially in settings where we have the opportunity to inform and reach a larger audience, there is a need to make clear that having a child doesn't make someone empathetic. Empathy comes from being present, from listening, from caring, and from holding on to our humanity. That does not require someone to be a parent. So I encourage you to share your stories. Now, I know it feels incredibly vulnerable, and it is. It's also empowering and freeing. Oftentimes it can feel like a secret we've been holding on to, and that can be really tiring. I've found that even when people don't have a supportive response to my story, I still feel lighter having told it. And it reminds me of my strength. Show that empathy comes from life experience and emotional capacity, not just from motherhood. And show this by acting and speaking empathetically in different settings. Highlight the roles you've taken on where you are nurturing through the work you do, any volunteer work, helping out with your family, helping a neighbor, mentoring someone. There really is no end to the ways you can show up and already are showing up for others in many ways. Speaking honestly about our experiences, such as the pain of being left out and the ways we care for others, is part of how we go about changing this view. The voices of women who are not moms, whether it's by choice or not, help break down this false idea of what it means to be a caring, feeling woman. Now, not everyone will hear it, right? Even if they're listening to women demonstrating this empathy, demonstrating your strength and your character and your humanity. But without sharing your stories, no one will. No one will get that chance to learn that everyone has the capacity to empathize, to feel, and to care for and about others. It doesn't require being a mom. So when I started this by saying, as a non-mom, it was a way of making space for myself and for all the rest of you whose hearts also break when you encounter suffering, loss, and pain in the world. It's a reminder that grief, compassion, and outrage aren't limited to any one identity. We can all be deeply affected by any tragedy that unfolds, regardless of whether we have children or not. We can acknowledge our pain and the pain of others as a non-mom, or better yet, without any identifier or qualifier. Everyone's sorrow matters. Everyone's compassion counts. And none of our feelings should be diminished or dismissed simply because we don't share a particular title or life experience. Now, I just want to make clear that in my sharing of this perspective, I'm not diminishing what mothers feel. It is real and profound. But I am affirming that our feelings, those of us who are without children, our feelings are real, equal, and deserving of space. We all have the capacity for heartbreak and empathy. And in times of tragedy, it's crucial to acknowledge every broken heart, not just those who fit into a certain role. All right, that's it for today. I will be back with you next week. Thanks for listening to Childless and Moving Onward. I hope this episode was helpful to you. If you liked what you heard, you can get more help from me with my guide, Steps to Overcome Self-Doubt and Feel Worthy When Being Childless Isn't by Choice. Click on the link in the episode notes, or you can find it on my website, pathonward.com. Until next week, thanks again for listening.